Wait. Oh.
Okay, welcome you guys to another coaching session. I was thinking about you before we were starting, and my overwhelming feeling was like, man, I just love this group. I love this group. This is an awesome group of humans who are trying to do life well. And you get one shot, man. One shot we get at life. And it's a great big experiment. Man, we gotta do the best we can and make it fun. I don't know if you guys heard, Rachel has published on her website the prologue, the rough draft or the prologue of her first memoir. She's writing out our stories in a series of books, and she put it out there, and we were reading it. It's exciting. You should go read it. Read the prologue and read the book when it comes out. But as I was reading it with some people earlier today.
Oh wait, no, let's back up.
Oh, back up.
You read it yourself.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
No, let's bring it up. Why not? He read it. We shared it I shared it in our family chat. So with Greg and our kids, our teenagers, and you read it, and then we talked about it during devotional because you thought it was depressing.
I was like, that's really depressing, babe. And she's like, it's my experience, not yours. I was like, yeah, it wasn't nearly that bad. And she's like, it was for me, right? Which is funny.
And like I was trying to explain it to him, I was intentionally starting with something with a difficult experience because, like you were saying, and our kids, our life is so great. We have so many cool things. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's going to be most of the book, but I'm going to share the difficult parts too, because that makes the story deeper. It makes the story more real. And so that's why I started with that, but he thought it was depressing.
Well, I don't know.
Now you can share the rest of it, though.
Can any of you relate to this, though, that like when Rachel is pregnant, she is a different person, right? So 6 times during our marriage, I was married to a different person. Now she's pregnant, I was like, hey, you'll come back. Like the woman I married will come back. We'll see you on the other side of this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And this last pregnancy was really tough, man. Like basically in bed the whole time.
Well,
she
I
was
wanted
so
to be
sick.
in bed the whole time for sure. But we were in Germany and we didn't have anywhere to live at first.
Yeah, we did.
Well, okay.
Remember, she was pregnant, so you gotta take everything she says during pregnancy. Like,
anyways, this is a long tangent. Go back to what you're saying.
So, anyways, we're reading it and telling the stories, and somebody said so profoundly, and it just really struck me powerfully. I wanted to share it today. She just said, "It makes me want to live a life that's worth telling. It makes me want to live in such a way that I could write a book about my life." And man, that just resonated with me. Like we get this one great shot at life. And we get to write our own story. You and I, we live in such abundant, amazing times. We have so much choice. I don't think we take near enough advantage of that. We're not slaves in Egypt or whatever. I mean, we have so much freedom and we get to create the life we want. And I know we feel like we have limitations, but there's still so much power of choice. And I'm like, why would we settle for less when you can live this extraordinary life on your terms, whatever extraordinary is for you, you can do that. Like, this is your shot. And we don't get any of this back. I mean, think about this for a second. We talk about this a lot because I get into this stuff. I kind of geek out about it. But in 5 years from now, Aaliyah, who's our 15-year-old, she'll be 20. So our first 4 kids will be out of the house. That's crazy. And we'll be down to 3 kids. Like, we could buy a sports car and fit. This is gonna be amazing. Oh, a car that'll go fast.
Our life will be totally different.
And fit in like easy parking spots. This would be amazing, right? But in 5 years, well, I mean, look at the last 5 years. How quickly did the last 5 years pass for you? I mean, for us, they flew by. Maybe for some of you, you're like an eternity. Like I just couldn't
The last
wait.
2 years, it's been an
It's
eternity.
been forever. Whatever it's been, right? Yeah, there was some slow and some fast, but it keeps flying. So I'm like, okay, what are we doing to really live deliberately and live in a way, just live a great story? Anyways, that's number one. Let's hold on. You guess so?
Well, I was just going to add to that. I think sometimes living a great story includes just paying attention more to the story you're living.
Yep. Oh, amen.
So if you just, in
Being
some ways,
present in your story.
if you're just present in your story, and I think writing it down or recording it in some way, that also, like, some people write books just on what happens in a year of their life or a day, or like when you get into the details of actually living, there's a lot there. There's a lot of complexity there. There's a lot of meaning there. And it's just kind of paying attention to it that gives it significance,
Yes.
I guess, as opposed to just being forgotten.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
record it. Keep a log of all the just neat things, fun things, meaningful things, impactful things, special things. How about special? Let's go with the word special. Keep a list of the special things that happen.
Well,
and will you please do it with your little ones? Like I'm looking at you, Emily. I'm like, I remember when my kids were little, and they would do the cutest things and say the cutest things. And I thought, I'll remember that forever. And now I can't remember which kid did what. And I wish I had kept a record, but I was too lazy to remember all the cute little things they did. Because each kid has their own little quirky things they'll do and whatever. And I was like, this is so adorable. I love this. I'll remember this forever. And now I'm like, we had a kid that did something once that I thought was cute. And I can't remember what it was. So keep a track of that, especially those of you who aren't really good at celebrating. You know who you are, that all the good things happen. You're like, yeah, whatever, but I have to do the next thing. Keep a log of the special things that happen.
I like to do voice messages on my phone because you can just slide down and there's this cool thing and you can go like this and just do a voice recording. That's fun. So then I go back and listen to them and I'm like, oh.
Like that's super easy journal entries that you can make on the go.
Yep.
Or on the pot or wherever you are. That's your only time. Like click record and record. Just capture it. Please just capture it. I wish I had done that. I wish I had done just that. Just quick video messages.
Well, you make it sound like you haven't done it at all. You have.
I've done a ton, but not near as much as I wish I had.
That's life.
Yeah.
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie. No, my vie will be what I make of it. And so, okay, so Rachel makes a great point. Be fully present in your own life, and that will make life better. On that note, if you'll allow me to rant a little bit here.
Wait, I thought you were ranting already.
Oh, I'm just getting warmed up.
Okay.
This came from a comment I saw online. It was a question. It was a gentleman who he was desperate to connect with his wife, and they had a couple of kids, and he was saying, like, I felt like he was saying, look, my marriage is good. I still love my wife. She still loves me, but she is always on her phone. And now he's like, I feel like I'm an interruption to her phone. Like she just lives there. That's her world now. And she's always on her device. And he's like, even like, you know, trying to initiate lovemaking and trying to connect with her. It's like she's on her bed right until the last minute until she goes to sleep, right? And that's a classic example of our time. And men do it too. Men and women both do it. But are you being present? Really, truly present? I wrote down in my notes after I was looking at it this morning, like many of us are inadvertently or blatantly committing mental or emotional adultery with the phone because we're just checking out and giving attention and devotion and maybe even love to whatever you do online. You with me?
And this happens with parenting too.
Absolutely does.
Yeah, because we're on our device when our kids are trying to talk to us and show us something. And we're like, yeah, yeah.
And even if it's not a device, you could be totally checked out, like mentally and emotionally. You're gonzo. You're way over here. You're in the past. You're in your future. But how often are we right in this moment?
And I think that's what makes a life worth writing about, because that's certainly what travel has done for us. Is it brings living in the moment like fully in your face, and that's why we love it. But that's something you can learn to do with just everyday experiences too. It doesn't have to be exotic or, some big adventure. You can learn to live in the moment of everyday moments, and that's what brings that feeling of excitement and meaning and significance. So yeah.
Let's just kind of grab a few specific things together, kind of mastermind here for a second. What are some things we can all do to be more fully present in the moment? How can we make our moments magical? Let's just share some ideas. What comes to mind? What's something you want to do better, or something you've done that works well? Like, how can we be more alive while we're alive?
I feel like we need to make up a word.
Yeah, there's this presence is a great word, but conscious, alert, aware, active versus
Momental.
passive.
That was my metaphor. In the moment, momental.
You're being momental.
Yes.
That's awesome. What do you think? This is where you share your ideas. Turn on your mics too.
There's a great book called The Present, which is a great reminder.
Nice. I hadn't heard of that one. Fantastic.
Eckhart Tolle did one a while ago called The Power of Now, right?
Is that what it was about? I haven't read that one. We own it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. It's about living in the moment. He literally spent like 2 years of his life sitting on a park bench, pretty much living in the moment. And he wrote a book about it. It was fascinating.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It reminds me, I met an author. His name's Tahir Shah. Really great author, great thinker. And he said that was one of his practices for living and for writing, is he would go to a place that he felt seemed significant. It might be an open market somewhere, or a street cafe, or some place that seemed either had real historical or significant value, or just seemed like a place where it was filled with life and people or nature. And he said he would sit there, and he says, I wouldn't allow myself to leave. I would sit there until I felt that place, until it connected with me and I connected with it. Yeah, until it touched me
in some way. And
so he would sit and sit and sit and sit and sit, and finally just, wow, really touch him. And then he would write about it. Man, it made his stories and his books so good and so engaging. You wanted to read. And it was just him sitting in a street cafe somewhere, but he captured it.
Usually in Morocco.
Yeah, which is awesome. It's a lively place, right? Okay, here's a couple more. There you go.
Try to remind myself to notice instead of blindly moving through the day.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Also, literally feeling the things around you. A moment of mindfulness brings you back. You feel the wind or even the couch below you.
Right? Touch. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Where you could just stop and touch something. When I've done that in nature, sometimes I see a really cool tree or something, or a rock. You just go touch it and connect with it instead of just walking past it. Like, just reach out and touch it. It seems weird, but it's such a cool experience, and it grounds you in a moment.
I struggle with this. I tend to think about the future a lot, so days go by fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I used to do that a lot too. Like, I would be doing my daily activities with the kids or washing the dishes, but I was always thinking about what I had to do next, or something I had to figure out, or what we were going to do in the future, or what happened in the past. And it was almost like I was living in my head essentially and not paying attention to being in the moment. So I'm very intentional about that now, though. I always like to just pay attention. If I'm washing, I'm looking at the water, I'm looking out the window, I'm just being in that moment of whatever it is I'm doing. And especially if you're listening to someone, you're just looking, paying attention. For me too, I always have to overcome my desire to do something else, like to go be productive. Oh, instead of talking to my kid, I need to go get this thing done. And when I stop doing that, that helps me be in the moment. When I say, okay, actually, no, this is what I need to get done right now. Just being here, just listening, just paying attention. I think that's powerful, because we always feel like we have this big to-do list. At least was me, that we have to check off. And so I can't be in the moment because I got to check my list off. So we just have to switch that and think, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is it, whatever's right in front of me.
Beautiful.
And then when you're done with that, then you can be like, okay, now what's next?
Back to my list.
It's okay to do that.
So yeah, there's a time to just be, and there's absolutely time to be productive, right? Because we got to get things done. We have lots and lots of roles and responsibilities.
Well,
just be.
Meaning there's a time that you actually think about, like you're supposed to think about the future at times. You're like, okay, I was enjoying the moment. Now let me think about what's next on my list, or this plan I need to make, or this project I need to do. It's good to have time to do that where you don't have interruptions, so to say, from kids or the dishes or the dog. But if we can separate that time more, so that when we're doing that thing, and when we're living and being in the moment, we're actually in the moment, it makes life more balanced and meaningful and peaceful, I think. Yeah.
So all of us that are here and all of us who are watching the recording that could make it, I'm not guilt tripping anybody. I just let's just all stop and say, where maybe have I been a little distracted or disconnected or negligent? Man, when I read that comment, it just struck me. My suspicion is his wife wasn't even aware of like this lonely desperation he was feeling. That he's felt so disconnected, and over just because she wants to be on her phone all the time. And when you stop and think about that, like, what? I'm prioritizing my phone over my wife? Like, that's retarded, right? But we'll slip into that. Or I know a lot of people live in the past. They just keep living in the past, either the glory days like Uncle Rico, or the trauma days, like, oh, things were terrible, and they just replay that and live back in the trauma instead of like, man, things are so much better right now. Why do I keep living back there when it wasn't? And if I stop and like, wait a minute, why would I neglect my wife or my children or this special moment right now because I'm back here rehashing something that was rotten? I got to let it go. Or if I get too much into work, too much into sports or movies or entertainment or whatever it is, I gotta check myself every once in a while. So again, I'm not guilting anyone, not making anybody feel bad, throwing anybody under the bus, just saying, let's all just stop and evaluate, like, have I been negligent at all? And then we have to stop and ask ourselves, like, if there's any kind of problem, you have to ask, like, have I contributed to this problem? And very often we'll notice, like, man, you know what? I've been kind of unpleasant to be around. And it's rubbing off on the whole family dynamics and the family culture. And I'm sitting here complaining about family dynamics and culture. But if I stop and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm the catalyst for this. It's on me. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna change that up. I'm gonna be pleasant to be around. I got an email recently from a gentleman who got into my Be the Man course, and that was his thing. He's like, I'm here because you said something about being unpleasant to be around, and he says, I realized that was me. That I am unpleasant to be around for my wife and my children. And he says, I'm changing that. I'm going to totally change that. I'm going to be the guy that's pleasant to be around. So, oh man, it just makes me think of that. Get fired up. Like be responsible for the energy you bring everywhere, to your work, to your family, to your marriage, to your parenting, to your home, your family culture and legacy. Like be responsible for that energy.
There's a good comment here.
Okay, go for it.
I find I go to my phone if I'm not settled inside. It's an escape.
Great insight.
I've had to get rid of social media to not allow myself that escape. Therefore, I deal with my feelings more. Yes, absolutely. That is a very powerful insight, because oftentimes that is what's happening, and could be in a situation like this that you're bringing up, that maybe she is escaping from something. Maybe she's escaping from wanting to have sex.
Maybe from
she's
him. Maybe he's unpleasant to be around.
Maybe,
she's like, oh,
exactly.
I'm just checking out.
Right, exactly. And that's very often the case in situations like that, and in a lot of things. In fact, more of what we're going to talk about today with parenting, that this issue of being on a phone or whatever, it's a symptom of another problem. One of them could be, I'm on my phone because I don't want to sit with my feelings. I don't want to process those. I could be on my phone because I'm avoiding interacting with my spouse. I could be on my phone because fill in the blank.
Ooh, resentment is a big thing that starts to build over time. And we may want to avoid that because that's painful. So I'm like, I'll just keep numbing or avoiding, or because resentment can build up. That's a very common one.
So if we pay attention to these things, then it actually provides an opportunity for us to dig deeper. And it's when we dig deeper that we actually find the solutions that we have to work through. It's not easy. That's the challenge. People want to avoid it because it's not easy. It's easier to get on your phone. That requires no thought, pretty much. You can just sit there and there's no thought involved. There's no processing. There's no digging. There's no dealing with. It's a harder route to deal with your feelings, but it's a more rewarding route, because it's what leads to what you ultimately want. You want more of these things. You want more connection. You want more happiness. You want more, fill in the blank. I'll just say, put in your word there, whatever it is. You want more of that, but it comes by taking the harder path. I'm reading the Dhammapada right now. This is my favorite thing I keep bringing up lately. So Greg,
because it's spot on, man.
And it's essentially Buddhist scripture in a way. And it's talking about how Buddha taught these two paths you can take. And the one path is the more pleasurable path. It's easier. It's more fun. It's more pleasing.
More comfortable, more convenient.
More convenient. It's like scrolling on your phone. But that path leads to suffering. He's like, that's just how it is. That path leads to suffering. Then there's the other path. It's harder. It requires more self-control. It requires more discipline. It requires more restraint. It requires more of you. But that's the path that leads to nirvana. That's the path that leads to lasting happiness. And I would say, I love this because it fits in exactly with everything Greg and I have been living and teaching for the past 20 years. We're like, take the road less traveled, take the harder road, take the more difficult path, exercise, eat well, have the tough conversations. It's the harder path, but guess where it leads? It leads to lasting happiness. So we have to consistently be doing that. And this is part of being in the moment, living in the moment, is paying attention to which path am I choosing right now?
And why?
Right. Because we have to consciously choose the harder path day by day, moment by moment, in order to bring us to the lasting happiness that we're after. Okay. Is that?
Amen to that awesomeness.
You had a number 2 thing now?
I can't remember because that was so
great.
dazzling what you just said there. This is powerful. So all of us just think through, is there something that needs to be addressed, either in ourselves or with spouse or kids, we're going to dive into the kids thing here right now, but even with your spouse, and if you've been avoiding it, stop avoiding it, time to face it. And let's get things where we want them to be, where we really feel like, oh, this is marriage. This is parenting. And those of you who do home education, like, this is education. This is living. This is what it's all about. Instead of just going through the motions and checking off the boxes like you're playing house. And like, that's kind of lame-o, right? So be present, be whole. Okay, boom. Let's dive in. So we always get tough questions and situations and scenarios. I read one just before I got on here. I read one. A lady reached out and her son has just left home. He's out. He took off. He's homeless, living in a hammock or in his car.
She said he was living in a hammock or something. And
she's like, Greg, you were homeless. Like, what's going on? I'm like, hey, I was homeless for a totally different reason. I don't know what's going on. But here's another example of kind of an end result, like of how you do parenting, how you do life. Like, it's going to lead to things. And what you do over years and decades is going to have a major effect, right? We don't often think about that. We don't think far enough out. We're not future facing enough. Most
after
of
we
us.
just talked
Yeah,
about
after we're like, be in the present. But no, Jordan Peterson said, here, I got it right here. I'm going to read it to you because it struck me so powerfully. He found this pen, and he was meeting with a friend, and the friend pulled out this pen, and the end of the pen had a little LED light, so he could see better, right? So he could see, and he's like, oh, a pen of light. Like, what can you write? He asked his friend to give it to him. He's like, will you make a gift of that to me? So his friend gave it to him, and now he's like, what am I going to do with my new pen of light? He's like, I feel like I have to write like the most profound truths with this pen of light. It's like you're writing your own scripture. And he's like, okay, what should I do? He's like, I'm going to start writing down things. Well, what should I write down with this pen of light? And he says, I got it. I'm going to write down the words that you want inscribed on your soul. Ooh, right? That's good. What are you going to write down the things you want inscribed in your soul. And he says, well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do the most good possible in the shortest amount of time. He said, and then one of the questions he got to is like, what am I going to do with my life? And this question, the question is powerful. The answer was so profound. He said, aim for paradise, but concentrate on today. Now, what was really fun is a couple of days before that I read this chapter, I had just been thinking myself and thinking about eternity and today. So I'm like, yeah, contemplate eternity. See how there are eternal consequences for our choices and actions, but focus on today. Concentrate on today while setting your sights on eternity. And the same thing is true, especially with parenting, is you have to keep seeing the end result. And we're talking about parenting here, but this all fits in like family culture and family legacy. Like, see the big picture where you're going, what you want your kids to be like as adults, what you want your life to be like in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years from now. See that so it orients you, and then focus on today and make sure today fits in that. Otherwise, if you don't see the big picture, what you're focusing on is just everywhere. You're just all over the place and there's no direction to it. And it just looks like a big chaotic mess, right? If we could just squiggle all over and then it goes nowhere. But if you focus only on the future and you don't concentrate on today, that future will never happen. That's just the beginning of delusion. You just think about this and do all the, always talking about, thinking about it, dreaming about it, but never acting in the moment on it. It'll never happen. So what we're going to talk about is like, see the big picture of where you want it to go and then act today.
Well, and
this
is in relation to parenting specifically, because you have to imagine the type of relationship you want to have with your children. Now, you brought up this question. We had another question that we got too that we're going to talk about. But this relates to both of them because often what we've seen happen, and we actually did a podcast about this, which is coming out next week, so we talk more about it, but what's happening is you're dealing with certain situations right here and now. In this case, this kid has moved out. The other case has to do with device usage and sneaking apps.
I'm so fired up today.
I know.
I'm like, how in the world? Like, this kid just moves out, and the mom's like, "Oh, what happened?"
Well,
You're like, "What?"
yeah, I'm going to get to that
Okay.
actually. But part of the problem is that we've seen in parenting is that the parents were not future focused enough, meaning they weren't thinking about the relationship they want to have with their adult children. That's what I think of when I think of future facing. What is the relationship I want to have with my children when they are adults? Do I want them to hate me? No. I mean, no parent plans on that happening. And yet lots of kids grow up hating their parents because of the way they were raised. Do I want my kids to respect me?
Creates the very thing they don't want.
Right. Partly because they didn't spend enough time thinking about them and how their today actions were affecting that future relationship. So if we think, oh, I want to have a good relationship with my adult children, I want to be friends with them, right? Then that's going to change how you behave and treat them in the moment, in today, because you want that long-term outcome. Now, we got into this before too, that doesn't mean you just let them do whatever they want, and because you want to be their friend and there's no discipline and there's no direction. It doesn't mean that either. But it means
they will not respect you.
Yeah, it means that you act in a way today that will help you reach that long-term goal. That also means that when you have a problem, like, well, okay, if you do this, it prevents certain problems like your kid leaving home. But if you have a problem like the other question received, which we'll explain more about, sneaking devices, sneaking apps, that you're no longer focusing on managing the symptoms, which are the behavior issue you're trying to deal with. This is the behavior. I don't like it. How can I control it? You take a totally different approach because you're focused on, how do I help my child become a competent, capable human being that will want to have a long-term relationship with me? Instead of, how do I dictate and control my child's behavior so they don't do these things I don't want them to do. So back to this idea though, because you said something when you're talking about this, you're like, well, I don't know why they moved out. But I thought, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some similarities or crossovers between your family situation and perhaps what's going on here. Because symptoms, we think of parenting and we think of marriage, there's symptoms. And just like with a disease, if you have this disease and it's going to have these symptoms, right? You can't have COVID unless you have certain symptoms. You can't have cancer unless you have certain symptoms. All diseases have symptoms. And it's similar in families, in parenting, in marriage. There are symptoms of certain problems that show up in certain ways. Yep. So obviously, leaving home is a symptom of a bigger problem.
There's a big underlying problem.
A child is not going to just leave home if everything is hunky-dory, right? There's something going on, even if it's a good family, even if they're good people. Very often, and my guess would be very often, it's a case of perhaps authoritarian parenting style that may be contributing to that. I was a rebellious child. I didn't leave home at a young age. I left as soon as I was 18. But it was because of authoritarian parenting style. You left home because of,
it was a disaster.
A lack of parenting, let's say. Yeah.
I just wanted to start my life. I want to live my life.
So,
okay, so let me ask that. Maybe you're thinking about it right now. I would love to hear from you. What kind of relationship do you want with your adult children? And those of you with younger children, that seems so far away.
It does, but that's the point.
Like, I don't know if we'll ever get there. Like, it's so, I remember thinking that, it's so far away. Like, will that ever happen?
And now we have 18 and 19 year olds.
Yeah. So they're young adults. and our youngest is 5. So if I jump at 20 years, but 20 years will fly by. When she's 25.
And we used to not think that.
Right. Now you're like, whew, that went fast. Because Rachel and I have been married 21 years. I'm like, flew by, right? So in 20 years, when our youngest is 25, what do we want our family legacy and family dynamics to be like? So let's share. You can jump on mic or throw it in the chat. Share some thoughts. Because this will be the guiding principle for a lot of what we do and how we respond to, well, one, how we prevent a lot of problems, and then 2, how we respond to those problems.
To behavioral issues, essentially. Yeah. Emily says, I want to talk with them often, go on trips as a family, and live near them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to jump in and say one thing that I don't want to happen is I don't want them to feel like they can't talk to me because I feel that way about my mom, and my husband feels that way about his parents. They're very, like, they have set ideas and they're not really flexible, and I'm like, is that just what happens? Like, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to be so rigid that, if, my son brings up something with me, I'm just going to give him the spiel, and not be willing to, change my mind, essentially. So I feel like that's tough, but I'm just hoping that I'm already in the right place where I'm on that path to be open-minded. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, perfect sense. Emily, in fact, I think what you just described is a perfect example of what we're talking about, because you're like, I don't feel like I can talk to my parents. I want my adult children to be able to talk to me. Now that becomes one guiding star for today.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you interact with your kids when they're little will determine whether they feel like they can talk to you in the future. So even right now when they're little and they're like, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And they throw out the craziest ideas, be like, man, that's interesting. Let's think about that. Well, let's jump online and learn about it. Let's go talk to somebody and let's figure it out. Let's go down these paths and let's learn and guide, instead of this is the way we do things around here and this the way we believe. And it's such rigidity that now when it gets into the teens are just resentful about and angry. And then when they're adults, they're like, I'm not even going to call. I can't even call and talk to my dad because I know he's just right here. I'm like, I can't talk to him about it. And I kind of feel the same way. I've never been able to really talk openly with my parents about lots and lots of things. So I feel the same thing, but I want that open relationship. Like, okay. And again, we train our children, you guys. We are training and conditioning our children for how they will interact with us in the future.
Well, and that's one thing I was thinking of, because, I used to believe that, I'll listen to my kids when they actually have something worthwhile to listen to, right? Because they would, especially when they're young, and they would just talk about all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And I don't get it. But like you're saying, we train our children when we don't listen and pay attention to their crazy stories and crazy things they want to tell you about that they get excited about. And especially as they get older and they can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk for so long. If you just ignore that, thinking, I'll wait till they are teenagers and they want to talk about meaningful things. Well, that'll never happen because you've trained them that you don't listen. You just zone out, you tune them out. And so they're like, I can't talk to them because they don't pay attention. You have to pay attention to the boring, inconsequential things, even when they're small. That's how you train them that I actually listen to you. When you're 2 and you're babbling on and I'm looking at you, they know mom listens. And then that just keeps going when they're 11 and when they're 15. You just keep listening. That's listening.
Yeah. The other day we had a devotional, and this was it was eye-opening, a little painful for me. 2 of my teens were like, mom listens way better than you, Dad. And
no, it's not how it started.
But that's where it ended. And I was like,
we have this question book that has a question for every day of the year. And we do it we're not like 100% consistent with it, but we do it during devotional sometimes. And it will just have whatever day of the year it is, it'll just have a question. And one of them was like, have you ever felt listened to? Who listens to you? Something like that. And two of the teens did put me.
Like, Mom listens to our troubles.
And I put you though, and you jokingly were like, oh, I'm glad someone put me down, right? It was a joke, but they said, well, yeah, Mom listens better than you do, Dad.
And here I am thinking, priding myself on being a great listener.
Which you are a great listener to me.
And I feel like I have been to other people.
Right. You are a coach.
I'm like, okay,
I
want feedback here, kiddos. I want feedback. And they were like, well, Dad, whenever we come to you with our problems, you're just like, that's not a real problem. Come on, let's go.
I was homeless when I was a teenager.
Where was your age? I didn't even have parents. What are you complaining about? And I'm always like wanting to give them solutions, right? They're like, you just tell us what, you just go off on all these great things we do. We know all the great things to do. We just wanted to complain for a little bit. So I'm guilty of not
joining the pity
party.
Yes,
And that,
true.
like, oh, you poor thing. Oh,
I'm a little better at
let's
that.
suffer together. It's this excited dad coach in me. But I realized it's not working. They're at a spot where they're like, hey, Dad, could you just listen?
I just want a pity party.
I just want you to listen. Don't say anything, just listen. I'm like, done. Got it. Which is the agreement Rachel and I have.
Yeah.
I just need to transfer that to the kids. Like if I start into fix it mode, she's like, hey, babe, just listen. I'm like, ooh.
And you're great at that.
And I zip my lips because I've learned. And I just sit there and go, huh? Yeah. Woo. And sometimes I literally have to bite my tongue because I'm like, I know the answer, but I'm not going to share it because she just wants me to listen, right? So, man, same with the kids. Sometimes you're going to want to just blurt out like, I know the answer, child. But like, oh, what could you do about that? Like, I don't know. And you're like, I know, ask me. But you have to withhold it, right? And build that relationship. Cool. Any other thoughts about this? I love this. Any other thoughts about how you want that relationship to look like? I know a big one while you're thinking and writing.
Which I'm sure you're doing.
I know a big one is how you respond to their mistakes, their errors. When they mess up, when they do something wrong, when they break a rule, your response will determine their future interactions with you when they make mistakes, when they break rules, when they mess up. And if you don't handle it well, they may never come to you again. And they may do everything in their power to avoid telling you, to which will happen, inevitably happens, like, why didn't you just tell me? They're like, are you kidding me? I can't tell you that stuff. Because you XYZ. Right? Again, this quote I love so much. He said, if your children are afraid to tell you the truth, who has made them afraid?
Well, not just tell you the truth, but tell you things.
Tell you anything. If your children are uncomfortable sharing things with you, who has made them uncomfortable? If your children, and this is the second question, if your children are hiding things from you, who has led them to that secrecy or this need to feel like they have to hide it, right? To be sneaky.
Yeah. So
let's get into this.
The next question we received was asking about something specifically like this, that I think it's a teenager has a device that they're allowed to use, but at night they turn it in. Except they just recently found that they were sneaking an old cracked phone into their bedroom at night and using it, and had downloaded forbidden apps onto it, which is like Snapchat. What do you call it? Crap chat or something.
Snap crap.
And TikTok. And so the question is, what do I do about this? Why are they sneaking it? Why are they downloading these apps? And how do I respond to it? And this is a great question. I mean, this is a very relevant topic. If you have young kids, it's not a problem now, but it will be a problem because we now parent in an age when we have devices and we have apps.
That
and
is not going away.
It's not going away. And so the solution is to find an approach that works long term and contributes to the long-term relationship you want to have with your child, your adult child. Because one approach, of course, is to just, okay, I'm taking it all away. I'm taking away the devices. I'm taking away the apps. You don't get any access. I'm turning off the Wi-Fi, like all these things. You can just lock down. And I'm not going to say that that's never the correct response. Sometimes that might be the correct response according to the situation and the child, depending on their maturity levels and things like that. That might be a response. But long term, that's not a good response. And that even that response won't work long term. It might work in the short term. It's an acute response, but it's not going to work
to fix a chronic problem.
Perpetuity. So the better response, kind of like we discussed before, when you're trying to fix you're trying to deal with the symptoms with that kind of response. You're locking down and you're like, I will make sure you don't use your device. I will make sure you don't get these apps. You're dealing with the symptom. This is the symptom. But there's an underlying problem there. There's an underlying cause. If your kid is sneaking, what's causing them to sneak? If your kid is downloading forbidden things, first of all, why are they forbidden? And why do they feel the need to do forbidden activities, right? That's the underlying cause. That's the underlying problem that needs to be addressed, not just how do I stop this from happening? So when you can work on the relationship with that child and help them dig deep into why they are doing these things, that's going to help them solve the problem for themselves, which is ultimately what you want. You want your children to solve their own problems. You want your children to not have a device at night, not because you say so, but because being on a device at night could be helping them not address their feelings. They're escaping, or it's interrupting their sleep, or it's whatever, all the other side effects of being on a device. Same with us. As parents, we don't want to be on our device late at night, not because our parents say so, but because it's not good for our health. So you have to teach your children that, and they have to understand that so that they internalize it as a truth that they live by, not because mom and dad say so, but because that's what's best for me. And I want to make decisions that are good for me. I mentioned before that I was a rebellious teenager because I had an authoritarian dad. Now, I adore my dad. I love him. I respect him a lot. He taught me a lot of things. He loved reading, and my love of reading has come from him. But he was very authoritarian, and he actually passed away when we'd been married about 2 years. And I rebelled. And I was thinking about it the other day. I moved out when I was 18, and I felt like it took about 1 to 2 years of me being out of my dad's direct control that I actually started to think about what I wanted for my life. That's about how long it took for me to recover, if that makes sense. Because before that,
you're just reactive.
Before that, everything I did was reactive. I did things not because it was good for me or not good for me, but because it was in response to what my dad wanted or didn't want. So I made decisions based off of that. I'm going to do this because my dad won't like it. That's no way for a teenager to think. And that's happening very often in our own parenting. Our children are doing things in response to what we are doing. So
and this is true of 2-year-olds as well.
Yeah, it
And
is.
12-year-olds, like the way we parent and the way we interact is going to cause these reactive behaviors or these self-governing behaviors.
Yeah. So one of the things that we want to do as parents is, in essence, to kind of get out of the way. We want to be a guide, but we want to give our kids enough space that they can be autonomous, in order to, meaning that they can think for themselves about what they really want for them. Because that's when my life, that's when I changed my life, when I finally had enough space to think, well, wait, what do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? What do I actually want to achieve or accomplish or become? When I had that space, then I started making choices that were in my better interest, because they were what I actually wanted. So in a situation like this, what's often happening is that a child's doing something, or a teenager's doing something because they're reacting to the control that they're receiving from their parents, instead of being taught to think about the situation from many angles and make a decision for themselves about what's best for them. Now, of course, they're going to make mistakes, and that's what we're afraid of as parents. We're like, I don't want you to make a mistake. I don't want you to be exposed to something on Snapchat. I don't want you to whatever. And so we're afraid of that happening. And so we want to protect them and we want to control them. But all that does is weaken their own ability to make decisions and to deal with bad things when they happen. If they get exposed to those things, they have to know what to do. They have to know how to handle those situations. And the only way they can learn how to handle those situations is if they ever have the opportunity to learn how to handle those situations. And guess what? It's going to happen. But it will either happen while they were under your roof, in your home, or it will happen when they leave.
As soon as they have freedom.
The last thing you want is for your adult baby child to have to deal with problems then. It's better that they learn how to do it now, when you are there to still be their guide and their mentor and protect them in a way that's safer and provides that molding and modeling and shaping. And I don't know, I just love the mentoring idea, the Gandalf, who are the other famous mentors, and what's the one from Aragon? Anyways.
Although, but like the great ones from the great classics are Abbe Faria from the Count of Monte Cristo.
I knew you knew this.
Monsieur Muriel from Les Mis, and on and on and on. Yoda, right? They all have these great mentors that are guiding them.
Right.
But
you need to be the Yoda.
Be the mentor. But that's the harder path, right?
That's the harder path.
It's almost easy, like, well, it's easy initially think, I'm just going to set up some hard rules and these are my rules and you follow my rules. That's easier, but ends up being so much harder because it doesn't work. Where ideally those are your rules and you live by your rules.
Exactly.
Your kids have to have their rules, because as soon as you're not around, they live by their rules and not your rules.
Which is what's going to happen anyways, because even if you have all the rules and all the control and all the passwords in your own house, eventually they're going to leave. And then they're going to live by their rules. And their rules are not necessarily your rules, which isn't always a bad thing. But my point being is, if they end up doing what I did, which was to respond and react to my parents' rules by creating totally different rules, that's not what you want. You want your kids to adopt your rules as their rules, or to challenge your rules, because sometimes your rules are dumb. And they're there to say, why do you have this stupid rule? And if you really can't explain to them why you have the stupid rule, then maybe it's a stupid rule that the entire family needs to throw out.
And don't ever get caught in that of my way or the highway, my house, my rules. That is low level parenting right there. So help your children, even when they're very young, starting young,
age appropriately.
At the right age and stage, cultivate their own rules. And we started with our kids when we were really little, and the question always was, who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? Whatever it was, like, sharing or fighting or whatever it was. What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? And it wasn't guilt tripping, it wasn't shaming. It was just a sincere question.
And
Like,
sometimes,
hey, make the choice determined by what kind of person you want to be, not because I want it or mom wants it or whatever. Just you get to decide what kind of person you want to be. And they start to govern themselves. And when you leave and say, hey, whatever you choose here will shape who you become, like make the choice that the kind of person you want to become, they make good choices. It's amazing.
and they make mistakes, but the mistakes become learning opportunities. Let's use the devices as an example. This mom is talking about sneaking devices, sneaking apps. That has happened to us, but we saw it as a learning opportunity, because like we talked about in the podcast, which we go into more detail with this, giving your kids freedom or autonomy or allowing them to make decisions doesn't mean you're not involved whatsoever. It doesn't mean you're like, yeah, just do whatever you want, kid, good luck. You're allowing them to choose while providing them feedback.
So it's like you got a safety rope. So I love rock climbing and rappelling, and you're always harnessed up and you have a safety rope, and you give them a little bit of slack so they can go for that next climb. If you keep it too tight, they can't do it. And if they keep it really tight, I'm doing all the work for them. They're not growing any muscle. They're not learning technique because I'm holding them on the cliffside. It doesn't serve them. It makes them weak. And if I'm too tight, they can't go for bigger moves. And so I got to give them a little extra room, but I'm not going to give them tons of room if they're not ready.
And you're not going to let them go without a rope.
And hey, you got this, kiddos. It's all about, freedom and independence here. Go without the rope. So the way it is you age appropriate, and well, not even age so much as maturity and understanding. Give them a little more rope. And if they make a mistake, pull it back a little bit, tighten it up, and not all the way. You're not an extremist all the way and all the way back in. You just go accordingly. And if you give them a little freedom and they keep falling down, pull it back a little bit. Okay, let's talk through this. Let's work through this. Let's make sure you really, truly understand it, embrace it, and believe it. Like you can operate on your own standards. All right. Wow, you're doing great. A little more rope here. Yeah, you're handling that so well. Here's a little more rope. And then they get the teens, you're like, oh, here's a driver's license. Yeah, you can take the car and you go out with some friends. Make sure you make some good choices. And you be back at a good time and drive responsibly, not like an idiot. And right, and they do it like, what great job. Here's some more. And then you get to this point where, like our 16-year-old son, he wanted to go work out of state.
He had the opportunity.
He had an awesome opportunity to work out of state, earn some money because he wants to
on a farm,
save the money to go to Kilimanjaro with me. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to this farm. And so he's gone for months and we totally trust him to fly by himself out there, work, do his own thing, and
to have his own device,
be his own person. As a 16-year-old, it's amazing because he has this moral compass, this inner compass that is developed. We've been working on since he was a baby, and it's in place. It works.
So I guess I kind of was just thinking while you were saying that of some specific examples of this. We call it the rope idea of, giving them freedom and allowing them practice, and if needed, pulling it back in. And I'm going to use devices since the question was about devices. So it looks like, of course, we don't give our children devices when they're very small. Well, okay, we have iPads for educational use, but not with unlimited access. I know all the passcodes. Cute baby. I know the passcodes. All of the apps have passcodes on them. So I am in control of that because I know age appropriately, my 5-year-old is not mature enough to make decisions about how they're going to use a device. That's just, they're not in maturity level, they're just not ready to do that. Just like they're not mature enough to make decisions about what they're going to eat all the time. So they don't just get to go eat cookies and candy and whatever. I have to be there to provide guidance and restrictions. That's age appropriate. As they get older, they get more practice. Okay, maybe they know the passcode to their thing and they have access to certain approved apps. Then as they get older still, say in their teens, when our teenagers got their own phones, some of them have phones with actual like their own SIM card that they can call, and some of them just have a phone that's like iTouch or something.
Wi-Fi only.
Wi-Fi use only. They were able to practice using it, meaning, okay, because at first I knew all the passcodes and everything, but then I'm like, okay, now you can practice using that. And so they would practice using their device and using certain apps. And what we would do on a weekly basis is do a screen time report. So basically, you know, on our iPhones every week, it says, here's your screen time usage for the week. And we would read it out loud to the whole family, Dad and I included. This is how much time I spent on my device during this week. This is how much per day. These are the apps I used most often. Now, if there was an extreme usage of a certain app, say it's YouTube or maybe a game, or maybe they're on Instagram for 11 hours or whatever, then we would talk about, okay, what are we going to do about that? What would you like to do about that? How do you feel about that? And then they would come up with an answer. Maybe it was deleting the app. Maybe it was me putting a screen time passcode on it. Maybe it was whatever. And then they would practice using it again. They would have better outcomes. And so kind of this rope idea, you're letting it out, you're pulling it back in, but you're holding them accountable for practicing making choices.
And constantly teaching and reiterating the principles.
The principles behind it. Exactly.
Always teaching the principles.
And we would talk about things like the social dilemma and how, you know, social media can steal our time and we end up scrolling for hours when we could be doing something that's actually going to make our life better and help us become the person we want to become, and to develop skills, and why it's important to have skills, and why it's important to XYZ, like all these things. You're teaching the principle behind it instead of just saying Instagram's bad, you shouldn't have it or use it, I'm not going to allow you to, and I'm in charge. You see the difference there? Okay.
Ooh, and one more thing I really want to emphasize. Actually, this came up last time, Emily. It was you guys that took the kids to the park and the pond, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the perfect example of the conditioning and training that's preventative. We get our kids into sports and into nature and into things that are creative, and we let them try tons of things.
Helping you live in the moment.
This class and this class that's helping them, be active and alive and in the moment, like physical living versus virtual living.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a child that's really into that and just loves it, whether it's mountain biking or horseback riding or
volleyball,
art or music or
parkour,
volleyball, whatever it is, right? Then they're way more likely to love that and be like, why would I want to spend my time staring at a screen when I could be out doing things I love? But that's all going to be cultivated by you starting when they're very little. You're bringing them up into those things, right? And we have to be more intentional and deliberate as parents, because it's so easy when we're busy of like, hey, just go watch a movie, right? And we still do that. We use that strategy, go watch a movie. But then we have to be careful, like, no, let's go out. One thing we've been doing lately is the kids, now that the weather's nice, they love going on family walks, especially in the woods. They just, the little girls cannot get enough of it. They'd be in the woods all the time if they could, right? And it's like, that's the coolest thing. I don't want to squelch that. I want to foster that. I want them to always love that, always cherish those memories and those feelings of being outside and being in the woods and kayaking and paddleboarding, jumping on the trampoline and drawing the slack line and riding bikes and scooters and skateboards and all of it. Like, I want them to love that, because that is this beautiful, natural way to keep them away from problems.
Which brings up a good point, because I know sometimes as parents, I know I've been guilty of this, that one of the reasons our kids aren't doing more of that is because we're not doing more of that.
Exactly.
And when they are like, hey, let's go for a walk in the woods, you're like, no, I've got to work. And you stare at your screen. And so they're like, oh, that's what we do in our family, right? So we have to be very aware of what culture we are fostering and creating in our family. And if we're telling our kids, don't be on devices so much, and we talked about this in the podcast, are we doing that? Are they seeing it like this, this guy with his wife? What are the kids seeing? Are they seeing us on our device until we fall asleep? And are we, many hours a day scrolling on Instagram? What are they seeing from us? Because we are modeling what they're going to act out. And if if they're sneaking things or getting the forbidden stuff, sometimes they're just justifying it because they're like, mom and dad are doing it.
Yeah. And we say silly things like, yeah, but we're adults. So I get to eat all the Oreos I want and binge watch Netflix as much as I want because I'm an adult.
And then
They're
they learn,
sitting there
"Oh,
filing that away.
that's what
Like,
adults do."
sweet. I can't wait to grow up. Nothing but Netflix and Oreos, baby.
no responsibility. Exactly.
Oh man. So it's all the big picture holistic stuff. Really, ultimately, who do we want to be? Who do we want our children to be? And help them understand that their actions or choices are the threads that are making up the tapestry of their life. And doing everything in our power, because it is our responsibility to make sure they truly understand it, and understand it to such a level that they choose to do it. They choose to opt in because it's not just your rule, it's their own rule. And now they're governing themselves instead of resenting all your arbitrary rules. And that's what changes the game.
And creates that long-term relationship you want when they're adults.
Their future. So circling back then, this kid that just randomly moves out one day and mom's like, what happened? Or the kid is sneaking stuff and hiding with his broken phone that who knows how he got that, or he's sneaking on the apps. Those are just symptoms of a much bigger problem that started years earlier. So please do not be so kind of absent-minded to think, well, my kids aren't teens yet. I'll worry about that later. All these problems we're telling you about that we hear about every week started years earlier. And it was like, it was parenting stuff. So let's all lean in wherever we're at with all of our kids and be fully present, fully engaged, and really clear about that future vision with our kids as adults, but concentrating on today. Love this stuff. Okay. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being awesome moms, mostly moms in here. There's some awesome dads too. Lean into this. Love on your kids. Do everything you can. And man, be present, be alive, enjoy it. And make sure you enjoy the journey. Some of those days are tough. We've had our fair share of tough days. But even on the tough days,
They're depressing though when I write about them in my blog.
Don't write about them like that, babe. But yeah, enjoy all of it. Enjoy the, see, when they're that adorable, even a major blowout is like fun. Okay, love you guys. Reach upward.